Welcome to our town hall for the Reserve Replenishment Assessment. And before we begin, I want to have everybody stand and do the Pledge of Allegiance. Thank you. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. Thank you. I'm going to turn this over to Chris, and he will introduce our special guest today.
Good morning, all. You can also call me the water boy, as I'm delivering the fresh water to the board. Welcome, everyone. We're having a town hall today, and I'd like to introduce our main speaker of the hour, the MC of the event, Wayne Gorelnik. He is an attorney in Palm Desert. And Wayne, do you just want to speak a little bit about yourself, please?
Well, wow, that's really loud. Is there someone doing feedback?
Yeah, we have.
Okay, I'll keep talking. Well, good morning. My name is Wayne Gorelnik. I'm with the law firm of Gorelnik and Gilliland, and we are located in Palm Desert, California, on the corner of Cook and Country Club. And the firm's been in existence for 35 years. When we represent and emphasize representing golf course communities. We represent over 20 that are over 1,000 units or more in the Inland Empire, in the desert area, as well as within the state of California. And we created the concept of the Reserve Replenishment Assessment about 20 years ago, but I don't want to steal Chris's thunder. Chris will explain it, and then I'll be here to answer questions and also add in things when Chris wants me to do so.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. So let's start off. What is the purpose? Some bullet points here, and I believe that was handed out to you. You have there. So the purpose, again, is to assist the association with a funding mechanism to increase the repair and replacement fund balance. If you were watching, and I know you were yesterday at yesterday's budget meeting, we talked about the increase year over year of the required contribution amount to the repair and replacement fund, going up about 25.7%, one of the largest increases we've had in that contribution rate, and it's really because of inflation, the cost of services, goods, et cetera, is going up. And so the purpose was to find an additional funding mechanism to put funds into the repair and replacement fund. Now, who is affected? This is who is affected. It's only first one-time assessment only for new home buyers into Sun Lakes. All existing owners, current owners, are grandfathered in. They are exempted. Now, this does not apply to or transfer to, it should say, I'm going to need to fix this, does apply to transfer of title to a family trust or immediate family. A current member who sells a home and buys another home within 6 months, these people are grandfathered in and are exempted. So you might remember, I believe Bob talked about that some time ago, that the idea was that you coming into the community and you sell your house, you're going to move it, you have 6 months to buy another house so that you do not have to pay that replenishment assessment. The timing, a new buyer has up to 9 months to pay this. So if it's not part of the escrow process at the beginning, the new buyer has 9 months to pay it. Now, how will this CC&R amendment be approved? It requires a CC&R amendment, which is a special election. The board will be talking about that tomorrow, setting the ballot, the date of the election. And the election will require, and you know this, we've had recently a couple of CC&R amendments that we've had to push through. One, you might remember, was required by Sacramento for rentals. That requires a 75% affirmative vote, not 75% voting, 75, so really a large amount that we have, the hurdle to get to an affirmative. 75% have to affirm, yes, we want this cease-and-our amendment. Now, what's the election time? That timeline, the election should occur around December 7th. That is the date we're targeting. It is a Thursday, and ballots will be due at that time. So this was an item you'll see in the reserve study kind of over the years from 2024 on to the future. That recommended green bar is how much we're going to need to contribute to the repair and replacement fund. The red is prior budgets, what we have been doing. And you see there's that gap between the green and the blue, the green and the red, and that is what we are hoping to have filled with this replenishment assessment. If this does not pass, we've talked about this, and actually that's my next slide, the increase in cost of goods, services, the contribution increase to 25.7, as I said earlier, and if this assessment, cease-and-our amendment, does not pass, then what will be required is we'll just have to continue to raise the assessment itself to fund the repair and replacement reserve fund. This is a critical time with the costs going up, that this is an important issue. As Wayne had said, other communities have done this, and now we would like to do that here at Sun Lakes. So with the replenishment fund, number one, we have additional funds coming in. That's a potential $400,000 that would go straight to the repair and replacement fund. It does not go to operating, does not go to CIP, does not go into Jason Ewald's pocket. No, these funds that are collected go straight to the repair and replacement fund, and they help offset large assessment contributions in the future. So it would hopefully, we would not have these 25.7% increases year over year, about roughly 500,000. And it brings in, again, new funds to help the funding level stay higher. Goal has always been, in the day I got here in 2016, the board at the time has always had the goal of keeping the percent funding in the reserves at 70% or higher. And it has fallen. I think we're projecting 64 point something, 64.8, thank you, in the next budget cycle. And so we need this replenishment fund. Now, without the replenishment fund, all repair and replacement funding will continue to come from assessments. And it will require, and we will require assessments, it will require assessments to increase to meet the 70% funding level. That has been the goal. And for a large amount of projects that are coming down the pipeline, and I use pipeline because irrigation has been one item. Irrigation on the golf course, perimeters, trees is something that has been deferred, in essence, kick the can down for a future board to address. And this board is now looking at it to address, when do we do that? This is an issue at the pump station. We have just a little history for those who may not know. The board of 2014 desired to convert turf on the golf course to drought tolerant. During that time, the pump station, and they paid for a landscape consultant, irrigation consultant to come in. There's a beautiful map of where these drought tolerant areas would be on the golf course. And during that time, the pump station failed. And instead of doing a like-for-like, same volume, same capacity, the board at that time felt, well, we're going to move to drought tolerant, so we don't need the bigger pump station. We can use the smaller one that will meet this new plan. Unfortunately, that plan had not been implemented, and so that is why some of the golfers may be going out in mornings and wondering why it's sloppy, because the sloppy water in the grass. That's just because our water window, we have a pump station that is doing its darndest to keep up with the watering demand, but a plan was made for drought tolerant and was never pursued. Finally, it was put on a ballot for the board, for the community to vote on. The community said no to drought tolerant. And so now we're stuck with a pump station that is overutilized, I would say, or inadequate to meet the needs of the golf course. We have members who live on the perimeters who have said, I bought here 15 years ago, 10 years ago, what have you, and it was green on my perimeter, and now, because of that drought, in the drought restrictions in 2016, it was cut off and it's never been back. We have trees that were planted years ago that have now grown, matured, and now the sprinkler system that had been there is hitting that tree so that the grass doesn't get fully watered. We've got some issues. And this is one of this replenishment assessment is one way to ensure that there's funding so these projects can move forward instead of waiting to address it. And there's other issues with equipment, other infrastructure needs that if we want to maintain a reserve funding level of close to 70%, we need to increase the amount funded to it because the costs keep going up on the ledger. If you look, the expense side is going up, but the revenue side will need to increase to meet those costs in the future. So with that, there's Wayne. I got a good picture of you, Wayne, there.
I was a little younger then.
So at this point, with the handout that we've provided, I wanted to give the opportunity for members to ask some questions, maybe something that we haven't covered. We've been talking about this for a while, but this is an opportunity to have Wayne come here, visit with the community. And so with that, I would ask if you have questions, please. Oh, Wayne, if you have some more input.
On. Okay, I just wanted to give a little more background. I developed the concept of a reserve replenishment assessment 20 years ago, and it was in response to a condominium community that had management. It sounds like we have management stories here, but 30 years ago, management determined in this one community that a lifetime tile meant that you didn't have to fund reserves for the tile roof system. So in a slope roof tile, the tile protects the underlayment, but the underlayment is what is the waterproofing, and that only lasts 20 years. So in that community, when everyone was getting leaks, they got hit with a special assessment of $25,000 a unit. And I was tasked with the scenario of making sure that never happened again, other than I'm not in control of reserves. And we created the reserve replenishment assessment. Since that time, that community has gotten over $10 million through that process so that the reserves are well funded. And then it kind of spread like wildfire in the last 5 years. So Sun City Palm Desert has adopted a community up in the Gold Country named Old Lake Wildwood has their ballot measure going out. It already went out. This community, I've got 5 others, and I've become somewhat of a celebrity that I don't like because I'm not one who likes to be the center of attention. I know that sounds like an oxymoron for an attorney, but it's true. And so why is this beneficial? Because it grandfathers existing owners. I want to make it clear that it's not just the existing owners, but if you're trying to carve out an estate plan and you convey from yourself to your trust, again, that would not be triggered. If you should sell your home A and want to upgrade or downsize, whatever it may be, and you do that within 6 months with the potential for a small extension even beyond that, you would still be considered an existing owner and would not be subject to the payment of this Reserve Replenishment Assessment, or RRA. Now, if you sell it, then the new owner would be required to pay it. They have 9 months to pay it. It's not a transfer fee. It's a fee due within 9 months by the new owner, equal to 6 months of your 6 months? We put this at 6 months of regular assessments. So, and it really works. I mean, over at Sun City, they're bringing in $600,000 a year. The main component is it doesn't go into your pockets at this point in time, and it keeps you up with the competition, which is to have no deferred maintenance. Your community and your plant and your golf course looks really nice, and that your assessment structure is keeping up with the rest of the similar senior housing communities with a golf course. You don't want to be at the high end, because that could impact property values. So this is the whole package of the reasons why you want to do this. Of course, it requires an amendment to the CCNRs. Without that amendment, it doesn't get approved and it just goes away. So you have to obtain the necessary vote, and you need 75% of those vote in each delegate area to approve it. So it's really important that you who have taken the time to come here today to let your members and neighbors know that this is a good way of keeping up with the competition and not impacting your fixed budgets if you're on a fixed budget. So with that, that's what I have to add to it, and I'm here to answer any questions you might have. From a legal standpoint, I turn over the politics to the board.
If you have a question, could you come up here to the podium, please? Thank you.
Ajit Desai from Torrey Pines. I thought I heard you say that this would be done outside of the escrow process, that people would have then a chance of either paying by installments or a lump sum. But I'm just curious why you chose to do it that way. And the reason is, as a buyer, psychologically speaking, if it is part of the escrow process, then I consider it as a cost of buying the house. While if it is a separate item, then I think of it as an added expense. So I look upon these a little differently, and I just think you'll get more of a pushback if you do it the way you're doing it. Thank you.
That's a very good question. I hope everyone heard that question, so I don't need to repeat it. But the question was, why is it not paid right out of escrow? And the answer is 98 to 99% will be paid through the escrow process. We just can't require it because we can't make it a transfer fee. This is specifically created as a special assessment that can be paid up to 9 months after any kind of a escrow process. We are duty bound in the Davis-Stirling Act that we cannot charge a fee that's more than the actual amount to facilitate a transfer. But the exception to that is a special assessment approved by the membership and required under the CCNRs pursuant to the Davis-Stirling Act, which is what this is. So in a practical effect, probably in all the transactions I'm aware of, which would be probably over 1,000, maybe a handful paid it outside of escrow. So when this association, when you sell your property and the buyer, normally what happens is an escrow demand is received. And from a disclosure standpoint, there would be a disclosure to the seller and to escrow that a reserve replenishment assessment we do within 9 months of escrow, and usually, as you indicated, the buyer prefers to pay it directly into escrow, and that's how it normally handled from a practical standpoint, but we can't mandate it as such. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you. Barbara Jesus. A couple of things. I would like to hear a further explanation on, in the packet, it's page 95. I don't know what page it is for the document, but it's talks about the extension. If you could explain some of that, particularly maybe C and D, and then there's another C on here that talks about rule implementation. If you could explain a little bit about that. It's like, if we're doing this, what rules would thereafter be needed versus it's just all in here and it's set. I can't agree that this is a special assessment. This is a fee, whatever you want to call it. I see it more as a fee than a special assessment. And even in the lien to enforce assessments, I noticed you took out regular or special and just changed all the wording to be assessments. So if you could do that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure, you're probably a realtor, if the issue and the question for clarity was if you were going to sell your property, let's call that property A, and then wish to purchase another, let's call that property B, within 6 months, you would still be considered an existing owner and grandfathered and not have to pay the reserve replenishment assessment. Now, there is a provision in here that, by way of an example, if we're having a buyer's market where it's really difficult to find buyers, and you keep having to list it and wait and wait and wait, then the board has the ability to extend the time frame, or maybe there was extenuating circumstances. Maybe you sold your property, we're going to buy another, and then you got ill, and you can't do it within 6 months, and you need an additional 3 months. This document gives you the ability to go to the board and ask for that extension. The question really, and it's basically a hardship and extension to give you the ability to facilitate it. We also gave the board the ability to adopt rules and regulations to implement this process. So those rules would have to be consistent with the text of the amendment contained within the CC&Rs, because I think everyone understands that rules must be consistent with those CC&Rs. They can supplement it. And by way of an example, I had one that just came up in another community wherein, let me see if I can do this right. Owner A and owner B meet. They are both single, and they want to now live together, but not get married. So they're living in sin, and they're buying unit C. But A is keeping his property. B is selling her property, and they're both buying unit C in their respective names. So there's a really interesting scenario. So B, the woman, is buying and selling within the 6-month period and would be considered an existing owner exempt from that assessment. But A, keeping his property, is not. So that, in effect, resulted in, at least in that one instance from that community, paying a half of that assessment, because one is actually buying and selling per the provisions of the CC&Rs, the other one wasn't. So that wouldn't qualify. Those are the kind of rules that would be potentially implemented. Different fact patterns could come up, policy decisions that the board might want to do, and it gives the board the power to adopt rules consistent with that text. So that's the reason that that was put in there. I lost track of where that lady went, but there you go. You did that on purpose, right? Yes, sir.
Yes, Harry Finnegan. The money's going into the reserve account. Now, can boards in future years change it so that money goes into the operations account?
No, absolutely not. That's the whole point of this thing. It has to go to reserves. It cannot be used for any other purpose. It's very rigid in this text of the amendment. Now, can the board borrow from reserves and then have to pay it back within 1 year, consistent with the Davis-Sterling Act? Absolutely, to meet short-term cash flow, but they have to pay it back. So other than borrowing for a short period of time, the answer is absolutely not. That money is designated only for reserves and cannot be used for fancy cars that we purchase for the board of directors. Can't be used in that fashion. Okay, that was a joke, by the way.
Now, if we do not get 75% of the vote, is there another option available to us to get this?
Yeah, there's
program?
a petition to Superior Court that you potentially used previously. We'll see where you go. I'm hopeful that you reach it and that you can get approval. I mean, the board, I mean, the inspector of election also has the ability to extend the time to afford more people the opportunity to vote. There's various things that can occur. Let's hope that you get approval, though.
Have you ever used this option in the past to go to Superior Court?
Have I used the option to
To take something
take it to
from the
court,
Supreme-
you mean?
Yes.
Not for this amendment, no.
Okay, thank you.
I will tell you the following, and follow up to that. Every community who has done this has gotten overwhelming support for approval, and it's never failed. I don't want you to be the first.
Yeah, we don't either.
I'm Bob Bidoff. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. You mentioned earlier about escrow transfer fees. You're restricted in what you can have in there, correct?
There is a provision in the Davis-Sterling Act and case law that limits what an association can charge for a transfer fee. This is not a transfer fee. I will also indicate that it does not apply to what a management can charge for a transfer
okay.
fee. That's a little bit different. We're getting a little
Okay.
off kilter.
We understand that. What I'm talking about is originally the builder owned the golf course, okay? And Sun Lakes Golf Club membership was done through escrow, $950, okay? That's not a transfer fee. It went to the builder for the golf course. It was a subsidy for the golf course, okay? When the association took the golf course over, they took that fee. It still goes through escrow, and they have they call it a membership fee.
For the resident social membership fee, yeah, I get that. Yes?
How can they do that? They're using that membership fee however they want. It doesn't go
It's
to the
for,
golf
it's an
course.
initiation fee, I believe. I'm not sure exactly. That's not something that, I'm not corporate counsel, I'm a special
Okay.
counsel on this issue.
If I
And,
can-
and I understand that there's an additional fee that is paid, but that's unrelated to a transfer fee too. I believe it relates to your social membership, but it's not the cost to change the membership records. It's different.
Okay, so if I can get your email address, I would like to communicate with you, please.
Understand that my special role is representing you as a corporation, but as directed by the board and management, and I can't take emails. I would just forward it on to Chris and Jason. So, I mean, if you have a question, that's who I would direct it to. I'm sorry, I wish I could do that, but you can understand, representing probably over
Yeah, so
75,000
the-
units,
so-
I'd be getting inundated with emails.
So the only recourse members have is to hire an attorney, right?
Recourse for what, sir?
Any legal questions we have.
Okay, that might be accurate, yes, but I think if you have a question, I think your recourse is to send it over to Chris.
I want an answer from an attorney, not, I'm sorry,
Well, maybe
Christopher.
Chris might then talk to the board, and I'm sure he doesn't ignore inquiries.
Thank you.
Sure.
I think it's key to separate that and to clarify that Wayne is working and was hired by the board to work on this issue alone. He's not going to be able to answer, nor has in his scope of work, has he been authorized to give opinions on existing CCNRs, existing bylaws, existing rules and regulations again. So that again would go to our normal legal counsel. This again, Wayne can answer questions, and his knowledge being asked for is on this CCNR amendment alone.
Right, I will indicate I did look at your governing documents for the how it would impact the reserve replenishment assessment, but I didn't get into the weeds of the validity of any existing governing provision you have now. That was not my scope, as Chris indicated.
Ken Johnson, Birdie Drive. Question, on our homeowners association fee, we have a bulk cable and internet assessment. Based on yesterday's budget session, we're probably going to be at 365, of which $65 would be the cable, which is 300 left for what I would consider funds to be used for repairs and replacement. So the cable and internet could go away. Spectrum likes it because they put it in a bulk and give us a big discount because it's a nice setting to have. But as the industry is moving towards streaming and changing the network infrastructure, there could be some problems with that being included and then going away. And if I was a buyer looking at it, I would say, well, what's this fee here? And why am I paying dollars in the assessment, special assessment, when that is really not part of what I would consider the fund?
Okay.
You guys discussed that?
Well, that isn't my scope, but having represented 400 HOAs and many, many large scales, and having negotiated over 100 double bulk agreements, most recent one is substantially less than what you're paying, but you've got a good deal. I will tell you this. I have a home in Lake Arrowhead, and I'm paying $300 for what you're getting for $65. And so let's talk about where the future is going to go. In the future is within the next couple of years. The video portion of your Spectrum deal will just convert to a bulk internet. And you'll want to do a bulk internet because everyone will be streaming, and the video content will be getting less and less. Although representing senior housing communities, I don't know how quickly that would happen because so many people are not necessarily so savvy into streaming. But to answer your question, you seem very savvy in that regard. Yes, Spectrum will no longer be, which is a charter company, a video company. They will be an internet streaming company. They're already switching to creating a product for internet streaming, which will be rolled out, I think, in 6 months from now. And if your question is, let's just say the internet portion, when your bulk expires, will be $40 instead of $65, that would provide $25 additional that could be used to your regular assessment. And if that was your question somewhat.
My question is that I don't think that is part of the
It's not.
Homeowners, replacement and
It
repair
isn't.
replacement, why I need to fund that, and it should be excluded from the calculation.
Right, so if you're paying $365 and $300 is your net.
300 is really our
I couldn't
homeowner
agree
assessment.
more.
And I think that's what should probably be,
And that's not reserves, because you got your operating portion. I don't know the difference. That'll defer to the board and Chris.
The Spectrum contract is up in August of 2025, and it's kind of a separate issue, but the next board will be negotiating that next year, and we'll see what transpires, but that is a separate issue.
yeah, I just think it should be excluded.
And
From
Ken,
the
I can
calculation.
see that argument. I would take the other argument is that the association has a contractual agreement and is obligated to make those payments on behalf until 2025.
Correct.
So it is even though you're getting that benefit, it is still an operating expense and obligation of the association. So when you look at the assessment, that's why it's included, because it's within that obligations that the association is going to have to pay. It isn't carved out for this fee calculation.
Okay. What I saw that you were going to allow 30-day extensions. What happens if you get done with I think it said 3 30-day extensions inside it for voting in the document that I read? Yeah, so what happens if you get down to the 3 and you're at 68%, not 75? Can you extend it again? Or if you have to start the whole process all over again?
If you limit it to 3 extensions, then that's it. but because of your delegate system, I don't think you'd get there.
So, comment. I hope that we really sit back and provide the right infrastructure to make sure that residents, as a over 20-year resident, that we really get good game plan and a project plan that gets out and how we're going to do it, how we answer questions. I didn't really know this was coming because my main email address got lost in the e-blast. We went to my supplemental, and I didn't even know this meeting was here today, and that was a surprise. So knowing how we've done past settings, and some of it is saying that the big expenditures at your beginning document are golf course related. When you talk about, you know, the big expenditures of water and golf, and there are some people in here that don't really like that expenditure, that you do a real good job of district delegates, communication. You really have to lay out a solid game plan to make sure people understand I'm voting for it. I hope you all vote for it as a 20-year resident, but we may have a group that 25%, there may be another 5% to get to the 75, that it's going to be the hard core to really tackle, and it may have to be the knocking on the door, double calls again, and I've seen us try to do these major ones, and I don't think we've done the best. We've done good, we've done pretty good. I'd like to say we really need to do the best. And I will do my part as a communicator and being able to help that process, but it takes more than just a few. It takes a large army to get something accomplished.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We've just begun to market this, and we will be, between now and December 7th, they'll be inundated with information regarding this. As time goes on, you'll probably say, oh, not again. But we need to get the vote out, and you're correct, you know, and we will market it.
And I was going to comment on that as well. We do have a marketing committee now, and they are on this, along with the delegates and anybody else who'd like to volunteer to help.
Good morning. My name is Paul Perkins. We've lived here for over 20 years. I have a question that you don't need to have a trust, you're going to have a will. How would that work if you had a will that was doing that? Because I'm aware of at least one transfer within Sun Lake several years ago did not go to a family member. It went to another person. So how would that work if it went to another person, not a family member?
So you're really getting into estate planning. The concept of a trust is that you as an individual, you and your spouse own it individually, and in order to avoid probate, you transfer it into your family trust. That transfer would not subject you to the reserve replenishment assessment. Now, if you are conveying it to, based on your someone, let's just not choose you, someone else owns it and passes, and it goes to an immediate family member, then there would not be that charge either. But if it goes to the third cousin on a divorced person, and yeah, there potentially would be a reserve replenishment assessment.
Well, the transfer that I'm talking about was we used a local attorney, and she explained at the time that there was a person living here that had no relatives that basically gave the property to the attorney.
Oh, that doesn't sound good.
Well, it does happen. We do have people that do not
Okay,
have family.
let's take that example. So if this person, owner A, passes and it ends up in greedy attorney's hands, the greedy attorney would have to pay the reserve replenishment assessment.
Okay, that answers my question.
And let's just hope that just doesn't happen. That's awful.
It did happen here, you know, and it's a reputable attorney, not greedy, nice lady. The other thing is,
Okay.
I think many of the people need to understand that this reserve fund is not the golf course alone. It's this building, it's the tables in it, the chairs, it's a whole bunch of things. It's more than just the golf course that you're talking about. It's it's how we replace items and fix items and things like that. Thank you.
Correct. Thank you, Paul.
Hi, I'm Dorothy Kowalski, and I have a question. When will they tell the prospective buyers that they have this additional assessment? Because I know in the past, people have come in here and bought houses, and then after they moved in, they get told by the HOA or the board that they need to paint the house on the outside, and that's an additional $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, depending. And then, you know, when were they going to be sprung with this assessment?
So if the membership approves it, the amendment would be recorded. It would be effective upon recordation. And that freezes the determination of who is an existing owner that would not pay it. So upon the date of recordation is the date on anything prior in time would be the existing owners not having to pay it. And if thereafter, let's just say it records on January 1 of 2024, and someone buys as an escrow in the middle of January of 2024, there will be a demand sent to management on behalf of the association, and it would be disclosed that there is a reserve replenishment assessment due within 9 months of transfer. That's when the disclosure would occur. What you are describing, and I assume that through the management discloses all assessments, discloses what I heard about the social membership initiation fee. All those things would be put forth in this escrow demand in the escrow certification process through Condicerts or whatever you're using to facilitate that. I don't know if First Service does it in a different fashion. But the architectural issues, doing after the fact, that's a totally different corporate counsel issue. I love my communities that do it during the escrow period, and there is that process where when you get a demand from escrow, seller then asks the association through this form we've created, hey, come out and take a look on the exterior and see if there's anything that wasn't caught that was done without an approval, or you painted your house purple and no one noticed it. I mean, that's kind of an oxymoron, but, and getting that up front is certainly a better approach than having a buyer being told, well, your seller didn't get approval for this, and after the fact, which is what your fact pattern. It has nothing to do with the reserve replenishment assessment, but good practices would be to try and get those inspections done during the escrow as opposed to after.
Why wouldn't they give it to them before they even decide to buy the house? That could be a factor.
Well, that's what I'm saying, during the escrow process, yeah.
No, but if I'm in here looking to buy a house, and then I'm through escrow, and you see all this line of fees, which are a good page and a half sometimes.
I'm agreeing with you. That would be something that this board can consider implementing, discussing it with management and with your corporate counsel, but that would actually be something that should be done, whereas there's already an existing process that management uses for disclosures of assessments. So if this was approved, it would be disclosed through escrow.
If I could just make a comment on that. I bought a house a couple of years ago, an additional house, and I was working with a realtor out of San Diego. They didn't know anything about our CC&Rs. They didn't know anything about anything that was going on. They said it was not a gated community, that we did not have any CC&Rs, that there were no, so they didn't know, which means they also didn't know the house needed to be painted every 18 years, and this would have been 25. I knew it because I lived here. But sometimes that happens because we've really branched out. We've got realtors from everywhere selling houses in here now. Yeah. And part of the challenge is because they've never really interacted with us before, they don't know. So it would benefit a buyer, because our CC&Rs are published on the website. Anybody can read them. So it would benefit a buyer to go read those before they bought, because then they could kind of look at it and find out some more information. That would be a suggestion of mine.
Yeah, but how many people, if I was coming in here, would know to look at your CCNRs, you know, before I even decide to
There are
buy?
some, the
Because
savvy ones,
I never
I
got
wasn't.
the CC before they were on the, we never,
Sure.
I've been here almost 25 years, and I
Yeah.
never got CCNRs until after we closed
And
escrow.
I understand that. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that is one of the things that happens because we
Yeah.
have so many people involved with helping to sell our houses because people want to live here, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's
Well,
part.
I'm just trying to look at the buyer thinking, okay, and then come up with another $3,000. That's a lot of money.
Yeah, no, but we do agree with you.
Yeah.
Well, basically, I'll answer that as well. This actually should be disclosed in the listing agreement.
Thank you very much for this forum to management, and thank you, council. We appreciate what you are doing to help us. You know, rules and regulations, CCNRs, it's really, I think, important. A lot of people don't pay attention. It was the first time when we moved here in '07, purchased in '06, that we were moving to a community like this, and I read every word of the CCNRs because I thought it was important, and I wanted to know and be approved. Some rules we like, some we don't. As a member of the Architectural Committee, I came from a meeting this morning, and painting just came up, and so let me refer to it. For a couple of years during the COVID era, notices were not sent out that people needed to paint. And so that's happening now to catch up. And there's just a lot of people grumbling because they want extensions, but it was something that they knew they needed to do and just didn't. And so we're going through a process now of people grumbling about having to paint their house, but they've known that. And so painting is just one of those issues that we deal with. But I am in favor of, and we need to make sure that if not the first year, over a period of the next couple of years, we need another $400,000 into this fund. And I think that's what you're saying would happen. And if we don't do this and get the 75% vote, that means that $400,000 we're going to have to pay because it's needed. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Fran Hanratty, and I have 3 questions for you. How did you arrive at this increase? It seems rather excessive. I think that this increase really, it would be very discouraging for new home buyers. My next question is this going to delay increasing HOA fees, and for how long? And my last question is, if this amendment does pass, when will this project that you have delayed will move forward? Thank you.
I'll take the first one, you can take the other two. The 6 months worth of regular assessments came about in trying to set a reasonable fee that also could increase based on cost of goods and services over the course of time. And it was established 20 years ago when we did it in this one community called the Lakes Country Club. Since that time, it was done at Sun City Palm Desert and like 5 other communities, and it was basically trying to establish a reasonable fee that would get you funded, but not too much that it would have an impact on any sales activity. And that, I believe, has clearly been proven to be true in the many hundreds of transactions that occurred at the lakes, and also the hundreds at Sun City. It has not impacted anything at all, and it's been a great way of funding reserves without going into the present owner's pockets. So it's worked real well, and that's how we came up with the 6 months, and it's always been my recommendation. I've had a few communities that went a little more, and I've tried to dissuade that, but I have one community that actually is based on 9 months, And I try to keep it and say 6 months seems to work. It's been working for, like I said, 20 years in one community, 4 or 5 years over at Sun City, and it works really well. And it has not impacted property values, and it's created a substantial amount of money going into the reserves to be used only for reserves. And I will comment on this. This is not intended to be for capital improvement projects. This is intended to be used for your existing plant, your existing golf course, your existing clubhouse, your existing roads, the gates, whatever you are responsible for as an association to maintain and repair and replace, that has a useful life of 30 years or less, gets to be identified in a reserve study. It's done every 3 years on a visible and then reviewed every year. And as I understand it, you're either going to have to come up with funds out of your assessment structure, or this is to try and damper down that cost over time. That doesn't mean you're still not going to have to fund reserves through assessments. It's just going to be a bit less based on this process. And the third one was, what are the projects? And that's not within my purview.
Right, so Fran, great question. And so if it passes, we would look to start, hopefully in January, this fee being started. The board has talked about it during the budget process of looking at 2025 for the golf course issues and some of the other equipment issues are 2024 and 2025, mainly dealing with Mark Birchfield's golf equipment. So the timeline right now for the large one is the golf course is a 2025 timeline. The issues with the vehicles is also a 2024, 2025 timeline. Cameras, et cetera, is probably going to be 2025 as well. And so that's the timeline we're looking at some of these projects that have been deferred.
Good morning. Royce Newman. It's basically a question of misunderstanding. We have a $900 and some fee that is now charged to new buyers. Is this an additional $2,000 that's going to be charged to them? So it's not an increase to that fee. It's a totally different set of monies that they're going to come up with. So we're really talking about asking new buyers to spend $3,000 going up. Is that what I understand?
Yeah, the $950 would still be in existence, and this fee would be an additional, but as Wayne said earlier, classified in the CC&Rs to only go to the repair and replacement fund, and so it restricts where those funds can flow to.
In bottom line, they're separate and distinct assessments. The one we're talking about can only be used and placed in the reserves for those items that have a useful life of 30 years or less, that you have an obligation as an association to maintain, repair, and replace. It's as simple as that.
Thank you. Barbara Jesus. Anybody who's been watching the reserve study over the last few years, so we did realize that it does show that the reserves would go down to like 35% given all the updates you would do after a 30-year period. So I encourage people to look at the reserve study. This might bring in $400,000 a year. That's chump change. The board is spending that in the next board meeting easily. So that's gone. So my question to the attorney is, what's next? If, boards have a duty to raise the dues to cover everything that's going to be needed and projected. So when we're done with this fee, what do you have in your back pocket for the next board who says, we need more money and we don't want to put it in the dues? Special assessments have their own rules and regulations. Yes, the board can borrow a little bit. So I'm just curious if you have some other things, and how many times can you do the fees? And if you have some other options since you've been around so long, I'd like to hear what they are. Thank you.
I don't know how to take, I've been along for so long, but, okay. So part of the Davis-Sterling Act requires, as part of the reserve study, it's really unique in California, you have to disclose. You don't have to actually have any certain percentage funded, but you must disclose. Of course, good HOAs that are managed meet certain milestones of funding, and your board is trying to get to 70%. In answer to your question, there's a mandatory disclosure of a 30-year reserve funding plan. It statutorily needs to be included within your annual budget and annual policy statement that the association's required to send not less than 30, no more than 90 days before the beginning of each budget year. You get it. And in that 30-year funding plan, this association wants to be able to hopefully assume, as the lady keeps switching places on me, I don't know where she went, that maybe there'll be $400,000 coming in. That's $400,000 less that you would have to assess in some other form, whether it's an increase in your regular assessments for higher reserve funding per month, or I know the 2 letters of special assessments that literally would be due immediately to fund something. Every association I know wants to avoid that sad story I told you about a $25,000 special assessment that forced homeowners to sell their units if they were on a fixed income and clearly had a negative property value indication. I mean, those units at that time were going for around $300,000 when they should have been going for $500,000. Now they're going for over $1 million. So it really is an effective tool, but as far as tools in a toolbox to fund reserves, boards of directors, if they're not being criminals, cannot print money, and they have to obtain those funds in really 2 forms: increases in regular assessments or a special assessment. This is another method, and it doesn't hurt your respective pocketbooks or purses. So in that regard, it's a good funding technique, and that's its sole purpose. And again, you get a surety. It is in the document. It's a breach of fiduciary duty of this board to use these funds for anything other than reserves. It must go in the reserve account. It is fair that you can borrow from reserves for short-term operating. There's all sorts of requirements of what you need to disclose when you're borrowing from reserves, and hopefully you never get there. But that's just a totally different conversation. So hopefully I've answered that question.
I'd like to just comment, as far as I'm concerned, what I see is that when a person buys a home in Sun Lakes, they get the immediate benefit of the infrastructure that we have in Sun Lakes. And it's, as we all acknowledge, a beautiful community. The board has done everything they can to maintain that beauty, and I think people acknowledge that it is beautiful. We have tremendous amenities, which when a buyer purchases a house in Sun Lakes, they get the immediate benefit of that. It's been done in other communities. And as far as looking in the toolbox to see what else we can do, I think, speaking for myself, the board is trying to maintain the HOA, the monthly HOA, as low as possible, because we know there are people on fixed income that live in our community, and we're sensitive to try and keep the HOA low, and I believe our HOA low is relatively low compared to other similar communities. So I'm in favor of this assessment.
Hi, my name is Don Viss, and I want to thank the board for allowing this format so that we can get our questions answered So I just have a question about, on your projections, how many homes per year on average have you calculated your numbers on?
It was 22.
22 sales?
22 sales per month, average.
Oh, per month? Okay, and so you expect then to raise how much during the first year?
That was that 400,000.
400,000, okay. Now, is this a ongoing thing, not subject to change in the future, or it can be modified or changed in the future?
Well, again, it's based on 6 months' worth of regular assessments that were in effect on the date that the new owner became a new owner. So it's a moving timeline based upon the budget of the association at the time that new buyer became an owner. So it changes, won't change much, but your budget, your annual budget changes, and the amount of your regular assessments changes on your fiscal year. So it does change somewhat.
So if you get overfunded in this account, can any of that money be moved to other areas, or has it?
It goes in the reserve account and can't be, that was a trick question. It cannot be changed and go from reserve to operating without borrowing. So it stays in the reserves, and God bless, if you are overfunded in the reserves, then this board and this membership did a good thing. You want to be overfunded. It's a rare occurrence.
Okay, so last question. My understanding is the membership fee, I think, is what it's currently called for, $950, I believe. Is that, it comes out of escrow?
Correct.
It was my understanding that that money was used for this sort of thing in the past, but somewhere along the line it got changed. Can you address that?
So it was originally designated as capital improvement to fund the capital improvement fund, which is for items that are new, not in existence, like drought tolerant in an area that's not drought tolerant, solar panels where they're not solar panels. And it was changed in 2020? No, not 2020. I think it was 20. It was 2020 it was changed and moved. The 950 then was changed to, those funds that were collected would go to the operating fund. It was done in an open session. It was allowed under the CCNRs, stating that it's for golf expenses, et cetera. And so at that time, rather than raise the assessments, that 950 was diverted to go to operating.
Okay, so now it's not capital expenditure?
It's not capital improvement. It's since 2020, I believe it's been going to, the date, it could be 2019, but sometime it's 2020. Those funds are going to the operating fund.
Are you then not creating a problem for capital improvement in the future by making that change?
I think the community as a whole is built out. The board in the future could, through assessment, fund capital improvement. It could also change and say the 950 is going to go back to capital improvement. It can do that. In the foreseeable future, the board had said it had collected $2 million and it needed to start spending it before it went back and asked the membership for more money into that. And so this board is actually working on spending that money. If there's something in the future where we want to develop a movie theater on the north 40 acres, then the board at that time could say, we're going to do, put the 950 back, or part of the assessment collected can go to that. But I don't think, at this point, I think the mandate, where I don't want to call Bob a mandate, you need to spend the $2 million before asking for more money.
Okay, so the capital improvement would something like building out the restaurant or not the restaurant, but the
lounge.
Yeah, would that be the kind of thing you'd spend?
And that's what it is.
Okay.
The capital improvement portion of it is going to be designated for lounge expansion. A portion of it is, and the board is working on that probably in the fourth quarter, of expanding cameras, because it's new areas, new cameras that are not existing new areas to be covered. Portion of that capital improvement would be used for that as well.
All right. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Michelle Walter, I wasn't going to talk, but I was just approached by a lady in the back, and I think we need to make this perfectly clear. I'm also in the marketing committee, marketing advisory committee, and we are really going to market this to the public. We're going to let everybody know all the if, ands, and buts. Beverly has come up with a bullet point. We are going to start putting that out so everybody understands. And I want to make sure, and Wayne, if you could reiterate, this is only for new home buyers. It is not for existing homeowners. And I think everybody's getting a little bit confused with that. You're not going to be paying for this. None of us that have been living here for 20 years are going to be paying for this. It is the new home buyers that are going to be doing this. So Wayne, if you could just reiterate that one more time.
It's not existing owners. It's only for new home buyers who purchase after the date the membership approves it and we record this amendment. That is it.
Thank you. And that's what we're going to be marketing. So please tell everybody, we need this. I know somebody had given me some other information, and I don't know that that's going to help us, but I really believe in this, and we're going to do everything that we can do to market this to get our 75%. We need that 75%. Thank you.
Thank you.
I want to talk about the budgeting process, okay?
The budgeting in reference to our budget here for 2024?
The budget is, you have two accounts, your operating account and your reserve account, right? Are we talking about the reserve account?
We have three accounts.
The reserve account, right?
This is for
Sorry, Wayne. Go for it.
There's three
It
accounts.
should be good.
The answer is these funds, I think I've said it maybe 10 or 15 times, but any amount paid for the reserve replenishment assessment must go in the reserve account and will not be placed in the operating account.
Okay. I've looked at the budgets for years, the 30-year, forecast of the level of the reserves. It's gone up and down, up and down. Well, that's the responsibility of the board to keep it at a certain level. So that's why if it's low, it's the responsibility of the board, and the board did not do their duty.
Well, let me address
there's a
that.
variation. I'll give it back to
Let
you,
me
Bob.
answer that. Excuse me, Wayne.
Okay.
Maybe you weren't here yesterday when we had our workshop, and we indicated that the reserves from last year to this year, they did decrease. They decreased 0.07%, less than 1%. They went from 65.5% to 64.8%. So the board is very aware, and we are addressing that, and we want to get it back up to at least 70. So we're close to it, but we want to get it to 70%, and I think this could have a positive impact upon it, and also could impact future HOA dues. Thank you.
Okay, so in my opinion, the budgeting process started to go off the rails around 2005. No, 2025. 2005, okay? And I've had a former board member tell me that the board used the reserve fund as a slush fund. And I've read through the budgets, and they would pull money out of there for other things. So it's the responsibility of the board. We need to elect people that are going to be physically responsible. That's all I have to say. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions for the reserve assessment replenishment?
3 times the charm, Barbara.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Sorry, this isn't necessarily for the attorney, but I did talk to someone in management who said you would perhaps address it today. If not, we could wait till the board meeting, but I was hoping you could explain how the voting works and the percentages and how we have to get to the 75% and what that all means.
I'll be talking about that tomorrow.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Well, before we finish up, I would like to give Wayne a great round of applause for all of his efforts. There will be another town hall this afternoon at 1 o'clock. And I want to thank everybody for coming out. We had a really good turnout today. And make sure that you talk to your delegates, talk to your friends and neighbors, and get the word out, because this is very important to vote. You can vote any way you wish, but to get the vote out, it's really, really important. And here we have an opportunity to impact our HOA fees, and we also have an opportunity to enhance our beautiful community. So I want to thank First Service, Wayne, and the entire board. Thank you.